It is time to go. I will do it elegantly. I mean, wow. Those were the reported words of Albert Einstein back in April of 1955 as he was, facing his own death. He was totally pragmatic, clear-headed, and he knew exactly how he wanted his story to end. And he was so clear about what he wanted. He said no grave, no monument, absolutely no relics. He was really worried that people would turn his remains into some kind of shrine, and he wanted none of that. For him, his work, that was his legacy, not his physical body. So that brings us to the big question, right? How on earth can you go see pieces of his brain in a museum today? Well, you're going to want to stick around for this because the answer involves a stolen organ, a rogue doctor, and a journey that is so bizarre, so strange, you'd think it was made up. It's wild. All right, let's get into it. Our story kicks off at the exact moment Einstein's final wishes were completely ignored. Okay, so here are the basics. We're on April 18th, 1955. Einstein is 76, and he's at Princeton Hospital in New Jersey. The cause of death? A burst abdominal aortic aneurysm, basically severe internal bleeding. And, true to form, he'd actually refused surgery. He accepted his fate with that same calm logic he brought to, the entire universe. And this is where our story takes a sharp turn. An autopsy was performed by the pathologist on duty, a man named Dr. Thomas Stoltz Harvey. Now, he was just the guy on the clock that day, right? His only job was to confirm why Einstein died. But being in that room with the body of maybe the most famous scientist who ever lived, he saw a chance to do something else entirely. And this is the moment everything changes. In a decision that is just, honestly, mind-boggling, Harvey removed Einstein's brain from his skull. And he did it completely without permission. He didn't ask the family. He didn't ask the hospital. He just took it. He set it aside, and the rest of Einstein's body was cremated exactly like he wanted. His family thought they were scattering all of him, but they had no idea a crucial piece was missing. So who was this guy, Dr. Harvey, and why in the world would he risk his entire career for Einstein's brain? Let's dig into the story of the pathologist and his, well, you could call it an obsession. The first thing they did was weigh it. It came in at 1,230 grams. And what's so interesting about that is that it's actually a little lighter than the average brain for a man his age. So right off the bat, we can bust that old myth that genius equals a giant brain. Nope. If there was a secret to his brilliance, it had to be hidden in the structure, not the size. But get this, it wasn't just the brain. As if this story wasn't already bizarre enough, Harvey also took Einstein's eyeballs. Yeah, his eyeballs. He apparently gave them to Einstein's eye doctor later on. I mean, what do you even do with that? Now, you can't keep a secret like, I have Einstein's brain forever, right? And the way it came out is just perfect. It was in a classroom. Dr. Harvey's own son was in class. The teacher mentioned Einstein's death, and the kid just pipes up and says, "My father has his brain." Can you even imagine being that teacher? Just total shock. And this really gets to the heart of the whole conflict, doesn't it? On one hand, you have Einstein, who just wanted to be cremated and have his ashes scattered quietly. No fuss, no idolatry. And on the other hand, you have Harvey, who claimed he was doing it all for science. He said studying the brain could unlock the secrets of genius and benefit all of humanity. He did eventually get a very reluctant sort of after-the-fact permission from Einstein's son Hans Albert, but only if the research was serious and didn't turn into a media circus. Well, as you can imagine, Princeton Hospital was not thrilled. When Harvey refused to hand over the brain and, wasn't actually publishing any research, they fired him. But did that stop him? Not at all. He just packed the brain up and took it with him on his way out the door. Now, to be fair to Harvey, he wasn't just keeping it in a closet as a souvenir. He really did intend for it to be studied. He actually went through a pretty careful scientific process. First, he injected it with formalin to preserve it. Then he took photos from every single angle. After that, he sectioned the whole thing into about 240 little blocks and made something like 1,000 microscopic slides. And where did he store these priceless pieces of scientific history? After all that meticulous work, he put them in 2 big glass mason jars. Basically, the brain that figured out relativity was now living in a couple of pickle jars. And then things get quiet. For the next 20 years or so, both Dr. Harvey and his secret prize just sort of disappeared. They fell off the map and entered this really long, really strange period of obscurity. Harvey's life just kind of unraveled. He started moving around a lot, from Philadelphia to Kansas. He hopped from job to job, and his career just went downhill. He never published that big study he'd promised, and in 1988, he actually lost his medical license. And the whole time, the brain was his constant companion, traveling with him everywhere he went. I mean, seriously, you cannot make this up. At one point, while he was in Kansas, he kept Einstein's brain in a cider box, stored under a beer cooler. Let that sink in. One of the most important artifacts of 20th century science was literally chilling under a beer cooler. The irony is just, it's incredible. And just when you think it can't get any weirder, it does. While he was living in Kansas, Harvey became friends with the famous writer William S. Burroughs. And apparently, over drinks, Harvey would just casually offer him a piece of the brain. You know, hey, Bill, want to slice Einstein? Thankfully, Burroughs never took him up on it. So by the time we get to the mid-70s, the trail had gone completely cold. For all intents and purposes, the brain had vanished. Most of the scientific world had either forgotten about it or just figured it got lost or thrown out somewhere along Harvey's strange journey. But it wasn't lost. Oh no. And in 1978, a very determined journalist was about to crack the case and bring this whole wild story roaring back into the headlines. So this journalist, his name was Stephen Levy, was working for a magazine called New Jersey Monthly, and his editor gives him this assignment that must have sounded impossible. Hey, go find Einstein's brain. A 23-year-old mystery. Where do you even start? Well, Levy did some amazing detective work, and he actually managed to track Dr. Harvey down to Wichita, Kansas. At first, Harvey was pretty cagey about it, didn't want to talk. But Levy kept at it, and finally, the old doctor admitted it. He still had the brain. The headline was just perfect. I found Einstein's brain, and that article absolutely blew up. It brought the whole story roaring back to life. Levy described how Harvey went over to a cider box, pulled out those 2 mason jars, and there it was, the brain that had literally changed our understanding of the universe. And just like that, the floodgates opened. It was a huge media sensation, and suddenly everyone wanted a piece of the action. Scientists and researchers started calling Harvey up, asking for samples, hoping to finally do the research he had promised to do all those years ago. And so began a brand new chapter for Einstein's brain. After decades hiding out in a box, it was finally going under the microscope. But the big question remained. Could it actually tell us anything about genius? So the first big study came out in 1985. A researcher at UC Berkeley, Dr. Marion Diamond, got a few samples. And what she found was really interesting. Einstein's brain seemed to have a higher ratio of glial cells to neurons. Now, glial cells are like the support crew for neurons, so her theory was, hey, maybe his brain cells were just working harder, using more energy, and needed more support. It was a really tantalizing clue. And other studies started to trickle out over the years. One found that his parietal lobes, the part of the brain involved in math and spatial thinking, were about 15% wider than average. Another pointed to some really unusual and complex folds. But here's the thing. Every single one of these exciting findings came with a huge but. We're talking about tiny sample sizes, the risk that scientists wanted to find something special, and, the simple fact that every single brain is different. Which all leads back to this really fundamental question, right? Can you actually find the source of genius just by looking at the physical anatomy of a brain? It seems like the answer is probably not. It's just not that simple. At the end of the day, every single study done on Einstein's brain runs into the same brick wall. It's a sample size of 1. You just can't make big, sweeping conclusions from a single brain. Was that wider parietal lobe the reason he was a genius? Or was it just a coincidence, a random quirk of his anatomy? There's just no way to ever know for sure. So while the scientists were debating all of this, the brain itself was about to go on one last, absolutely epic road trip before its very, very strange journey could finally come to a close. Okay, so picture this. It's 1997. A writer named Michael Paterniti decides to document this final bizarre chapter. He finds Dr. Harvey, who's now 84 years old, and offers to drive him all the way across America, from New Jersey to California. And the reason for this trip? Well, it's just as strange as you'd expect. Their destination? Berkeley, California. The mission?
to meet Einstein's granddaughter, a woman named Evelyn Einstein. Harvey's plan was to finally give what was left of the brain back to the family, and the cargo for this cross-country trip? The brain pieces, sloshing around in a Tupperware container in the trunk of the car. Unbelievable.
So they get there, and Harvey presents the Tupperware to Evelyn. And in this really emotional moment, she listens to his whole long, strange story. But in the end, she says no. She respectfully declined to take it. Once again, the family chose to honor her grandfather's wish. He did not want to become a relic.
You know, that road trip really seemed to be a turning point for Harvey. The very next year, in 1998, he finally gave it up. He returned what was left of the brain right back to where it all started, at the Princeton Medical Center. Harvey himself passed away in 2007, and his family then gave all the remaining materials to the National Museum of Health and Medicine, and from there, some of the slides were prepared for public display.
And that's finally where this incredible journey ends. After being stolen, hidden under a beer cooler, driven across the country in Tupperware, and poked and prodded by scientists, you can now go see slides of Albert Einstein's brain for yourself. They're on display at the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia. What a wild story, right? It just has everything. It's about ethics, it's about obsession, it's about that line between scientific curiosity and just plain crossing a line. And I think it's also about our fascination with genius, this deep down need we have to understand what makes a mind like Einstein's, well, tick. And that really leaves us with one big, tough question to think about. Dr. Harvey always said he did it for the good of science. Einstein just wanted privacy and death. So I want to leave you with this. Should the search for scientific knowledge ever get to overrule a person's final wishes? It's a tricky one. I'd love to know what you think, so drop a comment below. Hey, thanks so much for sticking with me through this absolutely incredible story. If you found it as fascinating as I did, do me a favor and hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching.